giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Hello, everybody. Cody Chaffins, Mike Griffith. We are live. We're doing a live version of On the Beat tonight. The big reason is what you watched earlier today on our DawgNation channels. You saw five-star quarterback commitment Jared Curtis commit to the Dogs, actually for the second time in his career. He says this one's going to stick. Georgia excited to get to him. We're going to have a little bit of that, talk about what this means for the Georgia quarterback room moving forward. We'll even talk a little Georgia softball, baseball coming up later in the program. But Mike, it's excited to be live here tonight.
Yeah, how about that? No safety net. Here we go. First snafu.
And part of what we're going to do rolling with this is I'm watching your comments come in. Yeah. So, hey, David Wayne Carroll, appreciate you being with us. Stephen Brock, good evening, DawgNation on Facebook. So if you guys have questions, you want to talk to Mike, because we are live tonight, we'll be a little informal and have some fun with it. But we'll start with the big story. Again, you just saw it just about an hour and a half ago. Jared Curtis, he's 6'3", 225 pounds, a top-rated quarterback in the class of 2026, commits to Georgia live on DawgNation, number 2 overall prospect in the entire class of 2026. And Mike, first time Georgia's gotten a 5-star quarterback commitment since Brock Vandagriff back in 2021. Your first thoughts on the Dogs getting the commitment of Jared Curtis?
Well, technically, Dylan Raiola was a commitment, right?
Oh, I get. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so if you can get him on campus, it'll be the first one. There
well, and I think you will. You know, I think it's going to go down. I feel pretty confident in this. You know, the fact that Jared did re-examine the process after the original commitment in March should give you more security. You know, this is a guy that I don't even think his biggest financial offer came from Georgia or Oregon. You know, listening to what his agent was telling Jeff Santel earlier, we got a great story up on DawgNation.com. Again, you saw some videos earlier with all the reactions, but I think this is a guy that's bought into Georgia, and certainly it's a guy that Georgia's bought into. It was very interesting, Cody, to hear him talk about the commitment being to Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo. Yeah. I mean, Mike Bobo made Matthew Stafford a number 1 overall pick. You know, Mike Bobo coached up the winningest quarterback in Georgia history, which was David Green. Mike Bobo coached up the SEC's all-time leading passer. And, you know, there's a track record there. And I dare say if, you know, more passes get caught and not dropped, who's to say what would have happened with Carson Beck last season, or maybe better production from the left side. But the fact of the matter is, for all the criticisms that sometimes happen within the fan base, you look at Georgia from the outside and you look at Mike Bobo's resume, and quarterbacks like Jared Curtis respect that and appreciate that. And there's a confidence in Georgia in the way that Kirby Smart does things, the way the program is built, and where the program has been under Kirby Smart's direction. This is a testament to the University of Georgia, its atmosphere, stadium setting, academics, but mostly Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo and the plan for Jared Curtis. And of course, now we all wait. You know, we have the season coming up with Gunnar Stockton. Hard to say what happens with Ryan Puglisi. Could be some competition there. But we know now that Jared Curtis does intend on being at the University of Georgia. And that is exciting for a 5-star quarterback, the number 1 quarterback, number 2 overall recruit in the 2026 class to be headed to Athens.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that quarterback room at Georgia and what that looks like moving forward. But when you talk about Jared Curtis, does it mean a little bit more that it was the Oregon Ducks that Georgia was competing against? You think about Oregon, and a guy like Dylan Gabriel just got drafted. This seems like an offense that puts up numbers like that, big numbers in the past. So the fact that Georgia wins this against Oregon, does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was Georgia against the world for Jared Curtis. I mean, everybody wanted this guy. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's Nike money there, and the Ducks have a, you know, sexy set of uniforms and as you said, a high-profile attacking offense. But at the end of the day, they didn't have much for Ohio State. And, you know, a quarterback's best friend, 2 best friends, the defense and the run game. And those are 2 things that Georgia's committed to, and we know that. You know, I look at this year's Georgia team, and you might say, oh, the quarterback situation is a little, you know, shaky. I mean, Gunnar Stockton's unproven at this point. But, man, that defense looks lights out, and the supporting cast looks solid. You look at this offensive line, and right now it's unproven. But by the time Jared Curtis is under center, a lot of these guys, these new names, these new faces, this is going to be a veteran group, a savvy group. And there's more recruits on the way to play with Jared Curtis. So to me, this is a big spark for the program. I think the Curtis commitment is a catalyst for the future of Georgia football. We started looking around the landscape, Cody, and saying, oh my gosh, NIL, transfer portal, where is this headed? You land the number one quarterback in the country, and that's a pretty good indication that things are headed in the right direction.
You talk about quarterbacks' best friends. Talon Taylor is one guy that was mentioned by name by Jared Curtis. Yeah. Could they end up playing together? Taylor would be there for a couple of years now, and Curtis gets there in 2026, so he'll be an experienced veteran. And the other thing that's a best friend is an offensive tackle, and that would be the question. Our Jeff Sintel, who is up in Nashville, we've got a ton of stuff all over our channels, whether it's online at DawgNation.com. Our YouTube channel has an exclusive one-on-one with Jared Curtis. I encourage you to watch. In about 45, 55 minutes after this show is over, you can hop on and watch that. But one of the things he told our Jeff Sintel is, hey, I'm going to be in Athens next week to recruit the number one offensive tackle in the class of 2026. That's Jackson Cantwell, who's going to be there. So that's the thing for a quarterback now. As you make your commitment, then we want to see how much of a leader you are. How many other guys can you get to commit to the G as well? What are those relationships? Can he start building those right now? Because that really is the sign of the best recruiting classes you get. You got a quarterback right there in the middle, bringing everybody else together.
Yeah, everybody wants to be a part of a good thing. I'd be surprised if they didn't get that left tackle. And I know that there's a lot of game left, but still, when you take a look at the direction that Georgia football is headed, and you take a look at the track record of Kirby Smart, one of my favorite stories, Cody, is when Kirby lost that 2018 national championship game to Alabama, and somebody said, man, that had to be hard to get over. And Kirby said, yeah, for about 24 hours. But then I was back out on the recruiting trail. I wasn't going to let that game beat me twice. And out of those ashes came back-to-back national championship recruiting classes. And that's one thing about Kirby Smart. I mean, the guy's got an insatiable desire to win. He's competitive, he's hungry, and he knows how to build a dynamic program. We've seen it happen before. I think you'll see it happen again. Kirby, like everybody else, having to adjust to the new rules, having to adjust to the NIL, having to adjust to the transfer portal. Now, on the verge of this House versus NCAA settlement, having to adjust to a roster. That was also a very important part of this, was how would a Curtis deal affect the future and Georgia's NIL salary negotiations under this proposed $20.5 million cap, which I expect will be finalized later this week. Story up on DawgNation.com on that as well. The fact that Kirby Smart now knows the rules of the game, I'm not going to say it's settled, but we're starting to see some settlement to all the changes in college football. Kirby built a national title program with the rules as they were, 21-22. Nobody else did that in the college football playoff era. Give Kirby Smart time to get the system, to work through it, and rebuild under these new rules. And I think Jared Curtis is a cornerstone of that building process.
You talked about the money and the NIL, and that's a big part of all of this. Down the stretch, if you were looking to talk to Jared Curtis, now you had to go through his agent. So money is a part of all of this. The On3 evaluation of his makings, they say he's worth $2.7 million. Now, what that looks like, how much the team pays, and how much, a car dealership contract or a Nike or a Gatorade or whatever other contracts are out there for him could look like, that's what they say he could be making. But if we talk about money, we talked about Jackson Cantwell. He's going to require some money in that 2026 class. And as we kind of get this house settlement and this salary cap that we're going to see, when you look at the quarterback room, and Puglisi and Ryan Montgomery, they just signed in this last class. Gunnar Stockton could come back another year if he has a good year this year. Are you committing a lot of money to a guy who, when is he going to play? And that's all going to start factoring in to, you can't, I was there when Justin Fields committed, standing in the road outside of Harrison High School, right? We had our chopper flying above that. I can remember when they got Jacob Eason and, you got so excited, but could this be the first ever 5-star quarterback recruit that Georgia gets that folks maybe aren't just totally ecstatic about, because now everybody's playing leather recliner, a general manager deciding, should we be spending that much money on this, and where should we be? Because it is a whole different ball game now. You're bringing in the 5-star, that's great, but is that money well spent? And I think that's the only reason I think Dog fans may not love this as much as they might have loved a 5-star quarterback commit in the past.
Well, I think that's true of any high-priced recruit now. When you take a look at the game, and now you're trying to figure out how teams are going to navigate this salary cap, if that's what we're going to call it. But remember, Cody, a lot of the money that these student athletes are going to make can be made outside of that $20.5 million cap, provided they have the sort of appeal that a guy like Jared Curtis does. And that will be determined by third-party Deloitte when we get into the quote-unquote fair market value. And if Jared Curtis is the number one quarterback in the recruiting class, which he is, he's going to have a very high fair market value, and thus he'll be able to make a lot of money outside of that cap that doesn't really count against the university. So that's the first thing that I would start with. The second thing is that I think the value of playing at Georgia speaks for itself. And we just saw 13 more guys drafted into the NFL. It was a record-breaking 15 not too long ago. I mean, this is kind of an annual thing for the Dogs to walk across the stage. 3 more first-round picks. I believe Kirby Smart now has more first-round picks than he has losses in his career at Georgia 2019. So I think, number one, you put faith in Kirby Smart. I think that's where this starts, if you're a fan that's wondering. And you got a guy here with a finance degree from the Terry School College of Business who was an academic All-American, who's proven he can build a championship program. Helped Nick Saban build a few of those too as his primary recruiter, if you go back and look at the talent evaluation and the role Kirby played in Alabama. So you've got a proven general manager sort as your head coach to begin with. 2, you've got a premier athlete who's going to demand fair market value that's higher, arguably, than anyone else in the 2026 class. Now, we don't know how fair market's going to work out yet, but we know Jared Curtis starts at or very near the very top of that. I dare say maybe only Arch Manning in 3 or 4 years, could have more value if everything works out the way that we think it will. So Curtis is going to make a lot of that money outside of the cap. 3, and you brought this up earlier, when you've got a quarterback like Jared Curtis, that's going to bring other talent around you. And that talent, while everybody wants that paycheck and everybody wants that NIL dollar, because of Georgia's ability to develop guys that get drafted in the NFL, they see that the long-term money is in the NFL. I mean, Travis Hunter even said that. As much money as Travis was making at Colorado with his 25 endorsement deals, he even recognized at the time that the NIL money is temporary. The NFL money is legacy money. And that's where you really want to get. Did I see I believe Matthew Stafford might have signed a contract. Did I see $44 million? There's not an NIL deal that equals that. And I'm not suggesting that Jared Curtis is going to make Matthew Stafford money in his first 3 years in the league, but he might on the second contract if he gets proper development, if he wins championships, if he has a supporting cast around him that enables him to put up the kind of numbers, win the kind of games that other quarterbacks before him have at Georgia. Unlike Aaron Murray, whose height was probably the biggest restriction, this is a guy with prototypical NFL size right now, who's only going to get bigger and stronger faster. So I like the move. I understand the move. There is some recent history that shows transfer quarterbacks have fared well, but so have first-round draft picks. I believe out of the last 6 national champions, 4 of those guys were transfers. That includes Stetson Bennett. But the other 2 were first-round picks. And in Curtis, you've got a guy with first-round NFL talent. And let's remember this, before Carson Beck completely drives off into the sunset in his Lamborghini, this is a guy that won a lot of football games, that had first-round talent. And again, I'll say it again, if not for drop passes, if he beats Alabama, I don't care. I don't think we care what kind of bags he's carrying, what kind of car he's driving. A few more passes caught and one elbow injury less, and Carson Beck could have been a first-round draft pick coming out of Georgia in this most recent draft.
Yeah, it was $44 million for Matthew Stafford, which does make if you're paying this guy $2 million a year, it pales in comparison. That's life-changing money, $44 million. He also has won a Super Bowl as well, so he's a veteran who has earned that money.
Probably already made about $200 million, by the way. I mean, other than Peyton Manning, I don't know if there's another quarterback that's made as much as Matthew Stafford. Maybe Tom Brady. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at those.
Kirk Cousins keeps making money, but I don't want to know.
You had to go there. The live programming, folks. This is one I'd be like, Cody, go back, cut that out. Leave Captain Kirk out of this.
Sorry, no shots at Michigan State here live. But speaking of live, I am watching everybody's comments. Richard Pollard, hello to you. Missy Thigpen, Mark Godfrey, Eric Ray. How about them dogs? He added another letter in there. Our friend Nestor watching on YouTube tonight. So, hey, Nestor, how are you? If you guys have questions for Mike, let us know about it. But you talked about his size. He's got 6'3", 225. And there were a lot of comparisons to Matthew Stafford. But the thing that I noticed when I start watching that tape, is this guy's going to pull it down and stick his shoulder into somebody. And he gets a little nasty when he's on the field, spiking the ball and getting excited. Stafford, he ran a little bit when he was at Georgia, but he was never really that Josh Allen run you over type. This is kind of Matthew Stafford plus a little bit of that new age.
Well, he's got a little bit of attitude. I've been up there to Nashville Christian before. They play really good football. It's a really good program. I know the head coach. I've seen the kind of players that they produce. And, of course, Jared won a state championship there. That metro Nashville area has really become a hotbed for college football. There was a time when you say, oh, you're not going to get a lot of guys out of Tennessee. That's not true anymore. You get into Nashville and that Murfreesboro area, it's very competitive. So this is a guy who's played some big-time football, tough-minded coach, tough-minded school. And a winner. More than anything else, when you talk about tucking it down or playing with fire, you think a little bit about Stetson Bennett, some of those great fourth quarters that he played. You just liked the swag and you just felt like it was infectious. We got to see a little bit of that out of Carson Beck late in the year last year against Tennessee when he pulled it down and ran that guy over. It was like somebody just threw a flame on the program and Georgia got hotter when Carson led him from behind against Georgia Tech. When you have a quarterback that plays with that sort of emotion and passion, it's infectious.
And love watching some of these highlights. If you're watching on video with us, you can see him really strong arm making those throws. And there you are, just kind of running through people. A state champion there at Nashville Christian. Granted, not in the highest classification, but like you said, a winner is a winner. You saw him spin the football after that as well. And that just shows you, I love a little moxie out of my quarterback. And let's push the limits. Let's get guys fired up. Let's show some emotion.
Well, Kirby Smart says it takes what it takes. And he also says that you're either elite or you're not, and you're looking at elite. And to me, to have elite at the quarterback position is paramount. Again, remains to be seen how Gunnar progresses this year. Not really fair to evaluate him on one start against Notre Dame, but this is, Gunnar was an elite guy in high school. Can't wait to see what he's going to do this season. Jared Curtis, same thing. This is a guy that's going to come into the program. You wonder how quickly he competes for the starting position. With this sort of size and ability, though, Cody, it's not unthinkable to think that this guy could be your starting quarterback his freshman year. I'm not putting that expectation on him, but when you put that salary behind him and when you put these skills that you're seeing on film on a college field with a guy that's got a high football IQ and NFL arm talent and a very strong supporting cast, I'd say at the very least, you're going to have a very lively quarterback competition when he arrives.
A little sidearm throw right there. It was Stafford and out. Thank you, Marshall Fleming. Got to love the live show tonight. Stafford, all-time NFL largest salary made in career at any position. So there you go. We got our viewers helping us out tonight, so appreciate you guys. We're going to talk more about Gunnar Stockton in just a minute, and about that quarterback room, and Mike Bobo, who was a big part of this recruitment as well. Hit all that right after the break. You are watching On the Beat, presented by Ingles.
It's time to discover the convenience and time savings of contact-free pickup with Ingles Curbside. Just visit shop.ingles-markets.com or download the app. And your Ingles personal shopper gets to work with specialized training on how to select the freshest items for a pre-scheduled pickup. They'll even text you with updates. You pull up to a designated space and your personal shopper delivers your items right to your vehicle. Fresh, fast, and affordable. It's all in the bag. Ingles. Low prices. Love the savings.
Welcome back to our special live edition of On the Beat. Now tonight, Monday night, Cody Chaffins and Mike Griffith, and we are, of course, talking about the commitment of Jared Curtis, five-star quarterback who committed to Georgia earlier today, live on DawgNation.com. And it was, so much fun, but we also got to hear the press conference afterwards, and one of the things he said, one of the first things he said, I love my relationship with Mike Bobo. And with the offseason that Mike Bobo's had, that had to feel pretty good, Mike.
Again, the Mike Bobo talk to me is somewhat inane. I understand the low-hanging fruit. You can kind of pick out the guy in the room that doesn't follow it closely. Oh, that Mike Bobo offense. I mean, yeah, but if only he could have made guys catch passes that were open, right? If only he could have executed at left tackle a little bit better. I don't have a big issue with Mike Bobo. I think Mike Bobo offenses are fine. I think it's a matter of execution and having players that can catch the football, not cough it up, block when they're supposed to. Remember, Mike Bobo didn't necessarily recruit all these guys. Now, I'll say this about Mike Bobo. He's not the most charismatic guy. He certainly doesn't come across as well as Todd Monken does in interviews and doesn't do much interviews to begin with. So I think sometimes maybe people confuse the lack of charismatic media personality with maybe not being a clever or smart play caller. But I go back to the game at Texas, and it was prove it time for Georgia. And that was a number one Texas team that was supposed to beat Georgia, that was favored to beat Georgia, and had the number one defense in the SEC at that time. And Georgia absolutely tore them up. And if not for a couple drop passes and maybe an interception, the score would have gotten even more out of hand. It felt like everybody in the stadium, including the officials, were against Georgia that night in Austin. Let's not just overlook the Texas game and the performance that Mike Bobo's offense put on and the play calling in that game. So I've seen some greatness out of Mike Bobo. Again, when we talk about the offense's inefficiency, I point more at the lack of execution and the breakdowns. I point at the injuries to an offensive line that had every guy miss at least 1 week of practice. I point to a backfield that was down to one scholarship running back, so you had to change the game plan because you didn't have enough health in your backfield to have the sort of balance. I point to a defense that couldn't get off the field. That in Georgia being behind in 8 games at halftime last year, there were a lot of circumstances that Todd Monken didn't have to deal with as the offensive coordinator that Mike Bobo dealt with. Kirby talks about complementary football. So again, I always try to provide some insight. And again, I realize people are going to believe what they want to believe, Cody. But to me, when you hear the number one quarterback in the nation telling you that he's coming to play for Mike Bobo, that means more than the guy holding the beer that didn't like the final play when Colby Young was unable to beat a 5'9" cornerback for what would have been a game-winning score.
Yeah, you talk about that Texas game. My mind goes back to the third quarter of the drive where Texas had gotten it a little close. Georgia goes 11 plays, 89 yards down for the touchdown. So that was, got to have it time, and the Dogs stepped up there for sure. When you talk about this quarterback room for Georgia, you got Gunnar Stockton in there this year. Then you got the two Ryans, Ryan Puglisi, who we did get to see a little bit on G-Day, and then Ryan Montgomery, who has been hurt this spring, so we haven't gotten to see him yet. What does the impact of a guy like Jared Curtis, who is getting all of this hype, have on those guys in that room? It seems like the transfer portal, once that guy gets there, seems like somebody's going to hit the portal. We've seen that before with Georgia with so much in their quarterback room.
Maybe not. I mean, we've seen Georgia carry 4 scholarship quarterbacks, and Brock Vandegrift gave it a good go and took it the distance before he finally made a decision to go to Kentucky for his final year of college football. I wouldn't get too far ahead in the game on the quarterback situation. I know that Gunnar is the perceived starter, and right now that's where the smart money goes if you're a betting guy. But do remember that Kirby Smart didn't make either one of those guys available for interviews, and he didn't say Gunnar Stockton is going to be our starter in the opening game. I mean, there is a competition there, and I think Puglisi has an upside. I think he has an NFL arm. I know Gunnar is game. I know that Gunnar is going to continue to improve, especially with the timing. A lot of what's going to happen next season is being decided right now. And let me tell you where I'm going with that. It's this offseason. It's what happens in these workouts when Ryan and Gunnar are out there working with these guys and they're perfecting their timing and their routes and they're spending time together on their own. This is when championships are won. And these Bulldogs do realize that they've got a heavy lift ahead. The head coach has made that clear. You remember how Kirby came out swinging in those press conferences, Cody. Everybody's out of shape. These guys need to be coached up. And need to want to be coached. Kirby Smart laid it down for these guys. We're not where we need to be. We need more passion and fire. The head coach has sent a message, and now it's going to be up to these quarterbacks to apply that message in these offseason workouts. Get that commitment level from everyone to stick around town, go to those offseason workouts, get those throwing sessions in, make football your priority, find your passion for the game and the G. That's where the title's going to be won. As far as the impact of this, too far off to tell. The quarterback room's got to play itself out. Right now, these guys are competing with one another and for their team. They understand that signing with Georgia means Kirby Smart is going out there to recruit the next best guy at every position. That's part of this place, and it's not for everyone or the faint of heart. If you're not a competitor and you're not willing to go every time it's go time, you ain't going to make it at Georgia. I don't care what the money is, the salary, the promises are there to compete. That's it. And that's what's going on right now. And when Jared Curtis shows up, the competition will be on. But make no mistake about it, the focus right now at Georgia is on the 2025 season and defending that SEC championship and get back in the playoff.
Yeah, you talk about one of those guys as it's a don't flinch moment. Ryan Puglisi was committed to Georgia in this last couple classes ago at this point, but he was one of those guys who was in with a guy we mentioned earlier in the show, Dylan Raiola. And Dylan Raiola committed to Georgia, and they were like, "Oh, Ryan, you're going to change your commitment?" And he was like, "Nah, I'm here for it, man. Bring it. That's why I'm coming here, is to compete." Gunnar Stockton, same thing. Kirby said multiple times. He's here to compete. He doesn't care who else you keep signing because he's there to compete. So when it comes to Gunnar versus Ryan Puglisi, I watch all the other DawgNation shows. I'm a big part behind the scenes of all those shows. Everybody keeps saying presumed starter Gunnar Stockton. Gunnar Stockton the starter. The way I heard it from you, and tell me if I'm wrong, there's a big time competition going on this summer. You see there's a way that Ryan Puglisi could be the man this season, and if it is, I doubt we'd ever hear anything before the Marshall game.
I think Ryan Puglisi has an opportunity, and it's up to the head coach and the offensive coordinator to decide who makes the offense go. I always reflect back on the Fromm versus Fields competition, and Kirby's ultimate answer was, number one, the plan is there is no plan, which I loved because that meant open competition. But number two, who moves the team the best? It's not, necessarily, the arm or the wheels or it's who moves the team the best. If we're 3 series into a Marshall game and Gunnar Stockton doesn't have Georgia in the end zone, don't be surprised if another guy doesn't get another opportunity. I'm not saying they're going to bench anybody or there's going to be any ultimatum, and I haven't heard anybody say that. But just having covered Kirby Smart as long as I have, if it ain't working, the guy ain't going to sit around and wait. It's just not. I mean, go back to the beginning of Stetson Bennett. Well, the second life of Stetson Bennett, right? I mean, that was supposed to be Carson Beck as next man up the week of the UAB game. Carson did not practice well, and Monken and Kirby pulled the plug and said, "We're rolling Stetson." That wasn't the plan. I remember when I wrote the story, I was practically getting hate mail for 24 hours. How can you say Stetson Bennett's going to start? Carson Beck's clearly might have had a little intel on that, but the fact of the matter was Stetson was a game guy that wanted to compete. And if you're willing to compete, Kirby Smart is going to give you that opportunity. He came right out and said that. If you're somebody that loves ball, that wants to compete, that's going to leave it on the field, there's a place for you at Georgia, and it ain't to sit on the bench. It's to get yourself better and compete. Look at Ladd McConkey. I mean, here's a guy that didn't even play as a true freshman, stuck it out, got better, continued to stack one good workout after another. And seemingly all of a sudden, Ladd McConkey's a star. Who's to say that can't happen for a Puglisi or a Montgomery, or maybe Gunnar Stockton, finds his touch and gets this timing down? I mean, we know he's got the aptitude. We know Gunnar's got the toughness. We just need to see it come to fruition in a game and an offense that's designed around him. That was the Carson Beck offense last year. Look at the difference between Stetson Bennett in 21 and 22. The offense was changed to work around him. We haven't seen that happen for Gunnar Stockton. There's an entire offseason that's going to be designed around Stockton's skills, or Puglisi's, or both, that's going to cater to these guys' strengths and weaknesses.
How much better is the schedule set up this year? You start with Marshall, then you got Austin Peay, all of that before you have to travel up to Knoxville for that first road SEC game to kind of work out those kinks. I mean, it seems to me that's the kind of schedule where there's going to be reps for everybody in those first couple of weeks.
I'm sorry, the Austin Peay thing, I just can't, I keep going, I don't know. This is a PG, what does the sign say? The zipper is open, go P. I think that's their cheer or something. I'm sure we'll see that sign somewhere. Maybe they'll get that out of the stadium, I don't know. The schedule sets up really well. I mean, let's face it, you're going to set a new school record for consecutive, maybe even an SEC record for consecutive. You'll have to check me on that, but there's going to be a record set when they beat Marshall for consecutive home wins. I don't think I'm going out too much on a ledge on that. And then the Austin Peay game. It's a great warm-up game. It's a great time to play him. I think you got Charlotte in November, another one of those kind of games. It sets up really well. Better them than Clemson. Glad you got Clemson out of the way last year, because Clemson looks loaded for bear this year. Glad they're not on the Georgia schedule this season. When you talk about elite quarterbacks, Cade Klubnik right now kind of going into next season is maybe a Heisman Trophy favorite, but I digress. Schedule sets up great. A lot of those difficult games Georgia played on the road last year will be in Athens, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas. I think Texas is the last SEC game. By then, you'd like to think the Georgia quarterback situation will look much, much better, much more well-oiled than it did in the G-Day game. Really hard to know what to take from that. Some really good moments, some not so good moments. Kirby giving kind of a mixed review. You've got to think by next November, late October. Florida, I'm glad that game's a little bit later. Cocktail party, if Lagway's healthy, that's going to be a contender. The road games, Tennessee looks a lot nicer now that Nico's gone. They don't have a returning starter. That should help out when you go to Neyland Stadium. Alabama games at home. You got to like that. You got to think this is the Dogs' year to finally get the Tide. Be interested to see what DeBoer does. They have a quarterback situation they're working through. Ole Miss lost a lot of those guys out of the front seven. I know they got some new guys in there, but Jackson Dart's gone. They've got a first-year starter. To answer your question, yes, the schedule looks easier than, I don't know how it could be any harder than last year, though. Only one place to go. It's got to be up. It got to be easier than what we saw last year.
We'll kind of round out this conversation talking football. A lot of folks, I'm just kind of reading the comments. Everybody's saying, got to get this offensive tackle. Very interesting. Francisco Hurtado says, it'd be a pity if Curtis had to wait till his junior year to play. If he's that good, if he is this true number one guy, I think Kirby Smart figures out a way to get him on the field. Everybody kind of speculating in the comments as well how much he's getting paid, because that is a definite part of this conversation. But if we move on, Greg Childers on Facebook just gave us this comment. Number one quarterback, number one baseball team, and the best player in the NBA. So we're going to talk about that number one baseball team a little bit. We're going to hit a little Georgia softball talk as well, including an exclusive interview that Mike had earlier today with Georgia softball's coach. But let's talk Georgia Diamond Dogs just for a moment. The team comes back now, ranked number one in some polls as they inch closer and closer to the postseason.
Yeah, that ranking's great, and it's obviously a landmark for the program. It's amazing the job that Wes Johnson's done, the Wizard has done. I don't know if they're really the number one team in the country. I don't know that I'm drinking that Kool-Aid, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that Georgia gets ranked high enough and finishes the season strong enough. They got this road trip at Alabama this weekend, and then they come home and play A&M. And they need to get a split. They need to win 3 out of these next 6 games, I think, to secure being in position to host a super regional. You never assume anything, but it's hard for me to imagine Georgia not winning their regional the way they're hitting the ball right now and the way Wes is getting these pitchers dialed in. But you need to win enough where you're in position to host that super. Remember, the Dogs were one game away from that last year. They faced a very determined NC State team that played extremely well, and Georgia pitching faltered late in the season. The pitching now, you're 1 year into Wes. He's been able to put his fingerprints all over this. I don't think you're going to see that happen. This is a program I believe will be in Omaha. To me, the question isn't if they make it to the College World Series. It's if they win it. You need to stay healthy. You need the pitching to continue to improve. Again, you're seeing Wes work out these rotations in the bullpen. This series at Alabama this weekend is going to be really important. If the Dogs can take 2 out of 3, they are in great shape. Got to get at least one. Can't imagine them being swept. And then they come home against a game A&M team, not highly ranked, but a team that went to Tennessee and took 2 out of 3 earlier this year, so certainly capable. So like where Georgia baseball is at, it's got a great vibe. Anybody that's been to Foley Field understands what I'm talking about when I talk about the vibe. When these guys are having fun and rolling, they're a little showy. They're not cocky, but they're confident and they have a lot of fun. And when that vibe is going and those red lights light up and the fans get into it, it's not the biggest stadium, but probably one of the most intimate. I mean, it's a great feeling. Hard to imagine anybody knocking Georgia out of the college baseball playoffs if they're hosting a super regional. So they head to Omaha. I've already got them penciled in, Cody, and it's just a matter of how they play when they get out there to Nebraska. Maybe Rolla will come to a game. Who knows? He's only 40. If the College World Series is in Omaha, he's only an hour away in Lincoln. He might come just for the heck of it, just to get his face on TV.
I think about Nebraska, and I think about, Mark Richt showed up. He all talked about the corn dogs out there, all the folks supporting Georgia. They were a fan favorite when they were last there. The problem is that was just way too long ago, back in 2008. All right, so we talked about that diamond. How about the smaller diamond as Georgia softball gets ready to enter the SEC tournament, and that SEC tournament happening at Jack Turner Stadium in Athens this week. The best of the college softball world will be in Athens. Some really incredible softball going to be played. Georgia opens up their tournament against Kentucky coming up tomorrow night. That's Tuesday night, depending on when you're watching this. And earlier today, Mike Griffith got to catch up with Tony Baldwin, the head coach of Georgia softball.
I'm now joined by Georgia softball coach Tony Baldwin. And coach, you guys, a young team, a team that has gone through the process, as we say, and a league that has 8 of the top 10 ranked teams looking at the RPI in the country. So I guess the good news is you guys have found a way to get at least one win in every single series. No sweeps. Haven't won a series, but at the same time, have seen the improvements, and gained a little bit of momentum, certainly in the circle that you'd want to get going into this SEC tournament. So I guess just kind of recap, folks, on this year's Bulldogs and what they might see this week in Athens at the Turner Complex with the SEC tournament here.
Yeah, it's been a tough year, obviously, in terms of the standard of success that we're looking for. However, each and every team has its own, kind of story. And this one is a young group. Our young players have gone through some of the struggles. This is a tough league to be young in. That has forced some of our older players maybe into roles that we didn't have in mind for them when things got started. So even some of our older players, I would say, are still inexperienced in the roles or the positions that they're playing. And so that's been a little bit of an Achilles heel. But, the good part is it is the hardest league in the country. I think I just heard on the radio that, this week, Arkansas has moved into the #1 ranking. That's the 5th SEC team to be ranked #1 this year. And they're the 5 seed in our conference. You look at Oklahoma, who won the conference, and they've lost 3 of their last 5 conference series, yet still won the league. So it's a tough league, as it is in all the sports in the SEC. And I'm not here to complain about that. If you don't like to compete, this is definitely not the league for you. The bright side is in 6 of the 8 weekends, we went into Sunday with a chance to win the series. We just haven't been able to string together consistent enough whole game performances. This weekend, we pitched really well. We gave up 3 hits in all 3 games and yet found a way to lose 2 out of 3. Last weekend we swung the bat really well and we just didn't pitch very well and defend very well. So if we can put the 2 sides together, we've shown that we can compete with anybody in our league. And if you can compete in your league, in this league, then you can compete with anybody in the country. And so, the best thing about the postseason, the SEC conference tournament here, is that all the stats and all the records and all that stuff goes out the window. And now you just got to play ball one day at a time. And we're excited to play here at home. We're excited to play against Kentucky and write the end of this story in a positive way.
Now, coaches always look forward. So I want to give people an example of what Coach Baldwin lost last year. 83% of the hits went out the door, 71% of the home runs, more than half the pitching wins. It was a very veteran team, and it's kind of a good news, bad news scenario. It's like, okay, a new energy, new identity. The team is kind of moving new direction. It's an exciting time when you've got this amount of young talent. Georgia's a great softball state, and you see a lot of Georgia kids that are on this roster. But really, when I look at the lineup, I recognize Dallas Goodnight, that speedy leadoff hitter, and she's so good at getting on base and so good in the outfield. And Jaden Goodwin's come along, and we know that Lindy Ray Davis and Sarah Gordon, these are names that people recognize. But there's a lot of young players around that. I guess the big deal was seeing Lily Backus, the pitcher, get a lot more innings, and she pitched well this weekend. And then I guess, what was it, Randy Rolling, the transfer from Cal, who started out strong and had a really good outing on Sunday. So a lot of momentum going into that 1 p.m. game against Kentucky on Tuesday that'll open up the SEC tournament. Now, I don't believe that you face Kentucky. What is the scout on Kentucky? Probably another one of these teams with a lot of talent in a really good league, I'd guess.
Yeah, for sure. They have a lot of new faces as well from last year. They've had their ups and downs, from an offense and pitching standpoint. This past weekend against Texas, their defense kind of let them down a little bit. But, even in game 2, they jumped out to a 5-0 lead. And so they're capable, and we're going to have to play, good competitive softball. I think more than anything, what we want to do is, the mindset we have is just to leave it out on the field, like go play as hard as we possibly can. Again, I've said this plenty of times over the course of the season, the outcomes a lot of times in this league can mask progress. That, just because you didn't get the right outcome didn't mean that you aren't starting to do things better, or you aren't playing the game the right way more consistently. And so some of those things we're doing a lot better. And, again, I think the real exciting thing for this group is it hasn't been the year that we wanted from outcomes, but they're competing their tails off. They're still proud to represent Georgia. They work well together. They play with a smile on their face. They just love to play ball, and we're excited to get back out there tomorrow.
And by the way, we have seen Georgia with a 7-win conference season go to the World Series before. Just a few years ago, I saw a Georgia team win 7 games, in the conference season. And then they win their regional. They knock off, I think it was a 13th Duke in a regional. And then they go down and beat Florida twice, a nationally seeded Florida team. And Georgia's in the World Series. How would you explain that, Coach? I mean, these Georgia teams seem to have had a penchant for, I don't want to say outperforming the regular season, but maybe peaking at the right time in softball.
Yeah, I think, from, something that we got from Lou is that you just keep coaching. You just keep coaching and trying to get better and better and better. And, the recipe is that you got to get a hot pitcher, and you got to believe that there's something that can, that the story can still be written the way that you want it. We have a saying in our program, the past is not predictive of the future. And so unless your behaviors match those of the past. So, we have a mindset here that you get to the postseason and you put together 2 good weekends and you're playing on the biggest show there is. And that's our mindset. And we're going to use that tomorrow. And certainly when we get into the NCAA tournament, wherever we go, and I don't mean this to be offensive to anybody, but, we know that we're not going to go to an SEC team the first weekend, and that in and of itself is a little bit exciting. So we know we're going to get sent somewhere where a team has had a good season, but we feel capable of beating anybody in the country, and we'll look forward to that opportunity.
Yeah, and you have, beat 3 top 10 teams this season. So we do know this is a very capable team. Coach Baldwin, we really appreciate you joining us. Good luck this week out there at Turner. Like I said, you got a history behind you of peaking in the postseason, and everyone knows what a great hitting coach you are. So let's hope the wind's blowing out for the Bulldogs and get those bats on the ball.
Fingers crossed. We appreciate you, Mike, and certainly all the fans out there in Athens and around. Come over to the Jack and watch some of the best softball in the country. It's going to be a great week. Our staff has done an unbelievable job. Not necessarily referring to the softball staff, but the athletic administration here at Georgia has really worked hard to put on a great show, and I think it's going to be an exciting week, and now we just got to hope the weather holds up all week.
Yeah, well, with 8 of the top 10 teams in the nation, I think a case could be made. It would be harder for a team to win the SEC tournament than the College World Series this year.
100%.
Got it. All right, Coach Baldwin, thank you very much. Cody, back to you.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, Mike and Coach Baldwin talking there, and you heard it, talking about harder to win the SEC tournament than it would be maybe a national championship this year. You look at a team like Tennessee is ranked 2nd in the country. They're only 4th in the SEC tournament where they stack up this week. So good luck to Georgia. Jack Turner Stadium, and that's something you've always done really well on this show, Mike, is look at all the Georgia sports. On the Beat means the entire Georgia beat and what's going on. But Jack Turner Stadium, it was a place when Lou Harris-Champer, who you heard Tony Baldwin refer to, that place gets rocking, and it's so much fun. It's one of the great atmospheres. Georgia soccer also has a great atmosphere. If you're one of those dog people who doesn't experience some of the other sports, you're really missing out because those places can be so much fun on a Friday night.
It's going to be a tremendous atmosphere and an opportunity for Athens to really showcase itself. And we know what a great town it is. We know what a great college town it is, but you're going to have some new fans there. You probably see some Oklahoma fans. You'll see some Texas fans in town. LSU always travels for this. Alabama as well. So I think the city of Athens and the campus is going to be on display. And I got a feeling that Tony's Bulldogs are going to rally. I mean, this is a young team, but it's a team with a lot of promise. And they're 20-10 at home. And when you play the schedule that Georgia plays, that says a lot. When he talked about maybe the results masking the progress, I couldn't help but think about the Georgia basketball team and the difficult stretches they went through. And yet when it came down to crunch time for Mike White's team to get it done down the stretch, they had that win streak that got them in the NCAA tournament. I know Georgia softball's already in the NCAA tournament, but they're going to be playing to try to host a regional, try to get off to a good start. Not that they can't win anywhere. They can. They've proven they can win in anybody's stadium anywhere, but it certainly helps when you're playing at home.
Yeah, and you talk about it's in every sport, right? Defense wins championships. You look back through Georgia softball this year, you get a 5-error game, a 3-error game, 2-error, and that's going to cost you. If they can clean that up, it really could be much better moving down the stretch.
Well, they lost a lot of players, and like any other program, when you lose a lot of players, there's a little bit of rebuilding or reloading when you get in, and there's just no margin for error in the SEC. Again, you got 8 of the top 10 teams in the country in one league, and we've seen it in football. I don't know if we've seen 8 of the top 10 in basketball, pretty doggone close, but to me, softball, the SEC absolutely owns the sport, especially now with Oklahoma and Texas being in there. And oh, by the way, Oklahoma won the league, but they lost 3 of their last 5 series. Just to give you some idea of how much depth there is in the SEC and how competitive it's going to be this week in Athens.
Going to be really fun there. All right, so that's Georgia softball. We talked a little Georgia baseball as we start to wrap up the show tonight. Mike, appreciate you doing it live. Everybody being with us tonight as we took some comments.
Cody, we got to make an Ant-Man reference, man. I mean, Ant-Man took down the Lakers, right? I mean, Anthony Edwards, take a look at that stat line. I mean, that's a former Georgia Bulldog and a former #1 pick. And seeing the Ant-Man come to fruition now in year 5 and having a little bit of fun, if you want to check into the NBA, not a bad time to be checking out Anthony Ant-Man Edwards, a guy that brought a smile and a lot of excitement to Georgia basketball, packed it out. Couldn't have been better to deal with. Real fun, and now to see him come into his own, and people are starting to talk about soon it could be the Ant-Man's league. I think Stephen Smith says it's not his league till he wins the West. The fact that we're talking about a Georgia basketball player maybe being, the best player in the NBA here in this next season or two, to me is pretty impressive. So that's something I think worth checking out too late at night. You turn on those NBA games, you see, you know what? That's a guy that I saw play at Stegman Coliseum, and now that's a Georgia Bulldog out there lighting it up for the Timberwolves.
A definite point of pride. I think back to Anthony Edwards' commitment ceremony. I was at that one, and there was a little baby right there. His little niece was right there, and Jared Curtis. As we bring it full circle, Jared Curtis had his niece down there at his commitment ceremony up in Nashville today. And you talk about the swagger that Anthony Edwards plays with. That's something a little bit from Jared Curtis. And that is the big news of the day. Jared Curtis, #1 quarterback in the class of 2026, committed to Georgia live on DawgNation earlier today. We'll pay him a little bit of money, but a future Kirby Smart does it again, brings another 5-star to Athens, GA.
Just don't let Elijah Griffin hit him in practice. Keep him away. Let's keep that non-contact jersey on there now. Slow him down. You got all that talent out there this year. Sometimes those Kirby scrimmages get a little crazy.
Yeah, they can be chirping at each other. Let's just keep our hands off for a little bit. If you missed any of our coverage today, I do encourage you to go on our DawgNation.com website. Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley have written some great articles there, kind of recapping and putting some of this into perspective, what it all means for Georgia, and find out exactly what Jared Curtis is like as a player. We also have a one-on-one interview with Jared Curtis already up right now on our DawgNation YouTube channel, so be sure to check out that. You want to be able to talk to your folks in your life, and you'll know what Jared Curtis is like. You can get a real sense of the young man from that interview with Jeff Sintel. Jeff will have more on him coming up. I'm sure some even more content from that trip to Nashville coming up on Before the Hedges this Wednesday night. We'll have DawgNation Daily coming up tomorrow morning with Brandon Adams. He will have his perspective on everything as well. So really big day on DawgNation. I appreciate everybody being with us here on this live edition of On the Beat. It's been a long day, Mike. We got to get some rest here.
Yeah, a lot of work. Good day's work for Kirby Smart. Again, the testament, if this is Kirby's kind of guy, then he's Georgia's kind of guy. That Kirby's not going to invest in somebody that doesn't represent everything he believes in, Cody.
All right, we'll have a lot more to talk about next Monday night right here on the Beat, presented by Ingalls.